Good afternoon, fourth graders. I am back again for Power Hour session. Today we'll be looking at reading. Specifically, we'll be looking at standard RI1, which basically asks us to ask and answer questions while we read. And we have a very specific question we're going to be tackling today. Our question is, according to the article, what are the traits of polar bears? Before we can really jump all the way into this, we need to focus on previewing the text. In a moment, your teacher is going to show you a passage. When you get your passage, you have some very specific things you need to do. The first thing you need to do is box the title of the story or the nonfiction passage in this case. Then I need you to underline subtitles, headings, maybe put some stars next to other text features. Underline ideas that you think are important. Here I've put think 5 W's. Who, what, where, when, and why are often important key details worth underlining. If you finish before time is called, I want you to read a second time, reread, because honestly, the more familiar you are with the text, the better you're going to be at answering the question. So I'm about to set a timer for 5 minutes. Your teacher will do this too. During this 5 minutes, once again, you are previewing the text. Teachers, you can begin the 5 minutes on your own. All right, so hopefully it has been 5 minutes. Teachers, if I've begun talking and you had not paused it, go ahead and hit that pause, wrap up your time so that we can move on into this article. Our objective today, in this lesson, you will learn how to find the answer to a question in an article by locating evidence in the text. Notice my color changed here. This is highly important. We have to pull evidence from the text on the Georgia milestones, so we need to be preparing for that now. One of the common mistakes that I see as I walk around this building is that many of you are great readers and you're great writers, but when it comes time to put the two together, you forget a very important step. Not taking the time to reflect on what you have just read. Many of you want to be fast and you think you know better. But one thing that we need to do is take the time to make sure we understood what we read. So part of today's strategy is really going to be making sure that we're reflecting on what we've read by reading again the text, looking for evidence to answer the question. So we already know our question today. What are the traits of polar bears according to the text? So as I'm reading, I'm going to very specifically keep that in mind and look for evidence. I'm going to highlight the evidence. Some of you might be at this point saying, teacher, I don't have a highlighter. You don't really need a highlighter. You can also underline. Highlight the evidence or underline the evidence found within the text. Then construct a response. That should sound familiar because on our milestones, we literally have constructed response. Construct a response using evidence from the text to answer the question in your own words. Your own words. When I looked at the right score data, it was clear that many of you understood the text, you understood the question, but because you didn't use your own words, it actually looked like you were copying. So, I can reflect on what I read. Before we begin, I want us to think about the title of the article, Classifying with Similar Traits. This tells me that this is definitely a nonfiction text. I can also begin looking at all of the text features within that text. Take a moment and go through and find some of those text features. You have 15 seconds to find those text features. So you probably noticed this is a chapter from a book. They have additional vocabulary listed with a bold word to show me. They also have subtitles and headings. They've got some of these extra tidbits of information. All of that is very important for reading this, and it makes reading this very different from reading, say, a narrative text. So, as I read, I told you one of the first things we needed to do was actually look for text evidence about our question. Our question has to do with what are the traits of a polar bear. I know you know polar bears are big. I know you know polar bears are white. I know you know polar bears live in the snow. But it's not about what you already know. It's about what the text tells me. Reread the text and look for evidence to answer the question. I love that you have background knowledge, but we have to go beyond it. So as I read this, I'm drawing attention to the word traits. And I'm actually looking for those polar bear traits. Look at the polar bear in the photo. Like all other animals, the polar bear has, traits or characteristics. Traits describe how the polar bear looks. For example, I got an example that's evidence. The polar bear has thick fur and large paws. Then I go over here and I can see traits also describe how the polar bear acts. For example, ding, 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 ding. I found evidence again. The polar bear is a strong swimmer. The ability to swim long distances is a trait of the polar bear. So what I've done is I have identified evidence that really matches the question. Here I can see it highlighted, but as you saw, I was underlining for those of you who do not have it. Now, not only do I need to highlight that evidence, but I might need to sticky note or jot down some of that evidence so I can put it together later. So here, I've pulled out what's important. Thick fur, large paws, strong swimmer, able to swim long distances, I pull out all that important information and evidence so that I can later answer the question specifically and completely. It's very important that I didn't stop just when I found thick fur. It wasn't enough. Good readers and good writers and good question answerers make sure they find all of the evidence. So I didn't stop when I saw this. I kept reading. Don't stop when you found a piece. Answer completely. So now I've got my evidence. I dug it out. I read with purpose. I reflected. I thought about it. Now it's time to construct a response. When I see construct a response, I think constructed response. And at that point, I think about race. Restate the question, answer the question, cite text evidence, we already found it, and explain what it means. So the question was, what are the traits of a polar bear? When I flip that, what are the traits of a polar bear? What are the traits of a polar bear? The traits of a polar bear are. Then I'm just going to list them. I'm going to answer that question, but I didn't get that information from my head. If it came from my head, I'd be talking about how they're big and white and live in the Arctic, but that's not my information that I'm looking for in the text. That's my information that I found in my brain. So here I have to give the author credit. According to the text, answer. That's a part of my citing, and then I explain. For instance, what are the traits of a polar bear? Polar bears have many traits. I flipped the question and answered it. I'm going to continue answering it with citing the evidence. According to the article, ding, 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 giving credit to the author, a polar bear has thick fur and large paws. I just gave the answer I found in the text. Now I can say more in my own words. Polar bears are strong swimmers that can swim long distances. So I did restate the question. I answered it. I cited evidence. The one piece I'm missing is the explain. Because this is about traits, I would say something like, polar bears have traits to help them survive. Here's the truth. Every single plant and animal has traits that help them survive. Now I have further explained, wrapped it up, tied a bow on it, and given a perfect, or nearly perfect, constructed response. So, what did we work on today? Today, we reread the text and looked for evidence to answer the question. We highlighted or underlined the evidence found within the text. Then, we constructed a response using race, restate, answer, cite, explain, using evidence from the text to answer the question in our own words. Now, you have learned how to find the answer to a question in an article by locating evidence in the text, and it's time to apply that. Follow the directions below with your classroom teachers. Finish up the questions about today's lesson on handout 1. So I've got for you a handout that looks like this, that has the same question that I just guided you through. I'd like for you to finish that. When you finish that, look at the remainder of the article. We just focused on the first part of the article. You're going to start focusing on the second part of this classifying similar traits article. As you're doing that, I want you to think about the question, what is an endoskeleton and what does it do? As you're reading the article, reviewing it, rereading it, think about what is an endoskeleton and what does it do? Work with a partner or a group or by yourself, up to your teacher, to answer the questions using today's strategy. So you'll be getting a second handout. It has today's question at the top. It gives our strategy, in case you've forgotten, and allows you to work through for a beautiful constructed response that answers the question, what is an endoskeleton and what does it do? You may pause now for the directions and begin. Thank you.